You need to identify your big ideas, and there should only be 2 or 3 of them. And then if a senior leader, the main job of a senior leader is to identify 2 or 3 important ideas and then to enforce great execution against those big ideas. And the good news is that the big ideas are usually incredibly easy to identify. You shouldn't need to think about them very much. You already know what they are. Let me give you an example. For Amazon, the consumer business, the 3 big ideas are low prices, fast delivery, and vast selection. You don't need, it's not the kind, the way you know that they're the big ideas is because they're so obvious. The big ideas should be obvious. And by the way, it's very hard to maintain a firm grasp of the obvious at all times. So little things can distract you from the obvious. But you have to back up and say, these are the 3 big ideas. How do we always deliver things a little faster? How do we always reduce our cost structure so that we can have prices that are a little lower? And the good thing about these big ideas is they will be stable in time. So I know for a fact that 10 years from now, customers are still going to like low prices. No matter what happens with technology and everything else, no matter what happens, people are going to like faster delivery. It is impossible for me to imagine a scenario where 10 years from now, a customer comes to me and says, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. This is so inconceivable that you can have great conviction as a leader to continue to put energy into driving speed of delivery. And whatever you're, in AWS, I know that customers, they like low prices, they like availability, they don't want the services to be down, they like data security. It's not very hard to figure out what the big ideas are, and then you can keep putting energy into those things, and you spin up those flywheels, and they'll still be paying you dividends 10 years from now. And what I'm saying, I'm putting it in kind of a business context, but for those of you who are in government, these principles would apply identically to a government organization. You should figure out what the big ideas are and just spin up flywheels. Get those things rolling. Make sure that you've picked things that'll still be true 10 years from now, 20 years from now. My job, one of my jobs as the leader of Amazon, is to encourage people to be bold. And people love to focus on things that aren't yet working. And that's good, it's human nature. That kind of divine discontent can be very helpful. But you really, it's incredibly hard to get people to take bold bets. And you need to encourage that. And if you're going to take bold bets, they're going to be experiments. And if they're experiments, you don't know ahead of time whether they're going to work. Experiments are by their very nature prone to failure, but big successes, a few big successes compensate for dozens and dozens of things that didn't work. The stress primarily comes from not taking action over something that you can have some control over. So if I find that some particular thing is causing me to have stress, that's a warning flag for me. What it means is there's something that I haven't completely identified, perhaps in my conscious mind, that is bothering me, and I haven't yet taken any action on it. I find as soon as I identify it and make the first phone call or send off the first email message or whatever it is that we're going to do to start to address that situation, even if it's not solved, the mere fact that we're addressing it dramatically reduces any stress that might come from it. So stress comes from ignoring things that you shouldn't be ignoring, I think in large part. So stress doesn't come, people get stress wrong all the time in my opinion. Stress doesn't come from hard work, for example. You can be working incredibly hard and loving it. And likewise, you can be out of work and incredibly stressed over that. So, and likewise, if you kind of use that as an analogy for what I was just talking about, if you're out of work, but you're going through, a disciplined approach of, a series of job interviews and so on and working to remedy that situation, you're going to be a lot less stressed than if you're just worrying about it and doing nothing.
Maybe someone in your family has lost their job and there's not enough money to go around. Maybe you live in a neighborhood where you don't feel safe or have friends who are pressuring you to do things you know aren't right. There is no excuse for not trying. Where you are right now doesn't have to determine where you'll end up. No one's written your destiny for you because you write your own destiny.
If you are going to try something hard, if you're putting yourself out there in some way, there are going to be times where you screw up or you don't succeed. Or there are times where you do everything right and you still don't succeed. But that's not just true of politics or running a non-for-profit. That's true Some of you talked about being entrepreneurial. If you're starting a clothing line, that's a cutthroat business. I have every confidence, Ayana, that you're going to succeed at some point, but you'll go through some failures. And I think that the most important thing is to learn from those failures and to have a sense of resilience and be able to examine what is it that I did not succeed at, why didn't I succeed, and what do I need to do better. If you're focused on giving of yourself to accomplish something, then even when you fail at a particular objective, you're still succeeding in learning about how you can accomplish those goals. Worry less about what you want to be and worry more about what you want to do. When you're more concerned with, I want to be a congressman, or I want to be a senator, or I want to be rich, then some people may succeed in chasing that goal, but when they get there, they don't know what to do with it. And if they don't get there, they don't have anything to show for it. But if you're worrying about, I want to improve education in low-income neighborhoods, or I want to deal with climate change and help save the planet, then whatever you're doing in pursuit of that goal, in and of itself, is going to be worthwhile. And it's going to teach you things, and it's going to put you in a position to have an impact. And then if it turns out as a result that you also end up being successful in politics, or whatever thing you're pursuing, then the most successful business people that I know, Bill Gates didn't start off saying, I want to be the richest man in the world. He started off saying to himself, I really think these computers are cool, and I want to write cool software. That's what he wanted to do. Worked out well for him.
And I remember in 1979 arriving as a freshman and doing what freshmen do, trying to figure out what courses are and trying to change your study habits and trying to identify that food in the cafeteria, what it is. And we were visited on campus by a couple of gentlemen from South Africa who were representatives of the ANC in 1979, 1980. And they spoke about their efforts to overcome apartheid. And for about an hour, myself and a group of students listened to these young men who were not much older than we were, describe the extraordinary struggles they were going through, the sacrifices that were being made, because they had a sense that somehow, some way, justice would prevail. And that brief meeting, I think, in some ways changed my life, because what it told me, first of all, was that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they're given an opportunity. We sometimes think that our leaders have to have fancy degrees or well-educated or some public office somewhere. These young men had none of those things. But what they possessed was anger over injustice that they were able to channel in a constructive, positive way. And I thought to myself that they gave me some sense of the direction that my life might go. And so I became active in the anti-apartheid movement on campuses. But over time, I like to think that I was part of that mosaic that applied pressure and ultimately helped those in South Africa achieve the extraordinary liberation that I would witness almost 10 years later as a law student. And I remember the image of Nelson Mandela walking out of prison and understanding that a seminal moment in history had occurred, and that Mandela's long march towards freedom was not his alone, but was part of thousands of footsteps, millions of footsteps of people all around the world. And I trace back me getting involved in politics to that moment, because as a consequence of that organizing on a college campus, I became a community organizer. As a consequence of a community organizer, after going back to law school, became a civil rights attorney. As a consequence of being a civil rights attorney, I entered the state legislature, and I now stand before you as a United States Senator and as a candidate for president.
And there were two different perspectives. There was the spiritual perspective of life, and there was a scientific. What was interesting as a child even, I saw that many spiritual people would talk about the glory of spirit, but then as a child I could also see, while they had nice talk, their lives didn't match what they were teaching. And so at some point I started to say that spirituality is not the path, but I saw science. And what was science unique? It was that a truth in science on this side of the planet is the same truth in science on the other side of the planet. And I started to realize that the understanding of science seemed to be more important than the belief in spirituality. And then, of course, as a kid, Albert Einstein was still alive. And as a kid, when you see Albert Einstein, he's like the most lovable grandfather image you could ever imagine, a joy-filled scientist. So I said, that's where I'm going to go. I spent the next 30, 40 years of my life in deep science. I learned everything just like out of a book. I just read it and it became, yes, that's true. And genes control life and we're just molecules and then we have life and then we die and then the genes and molecules turn back into the dust. And I thought, oh, okay, we just have this one life. And so I had no spirituality. As a matter of fact, I was very proud of my science. And then I started working on cells. And I saw something that was completely different than what was going on with my field of science. In one part of my life, I'm teaching in the medical school, and I'm teaching conventional science. Genes control life, and your fate is determined by your genes. But in my laboratory, I was working with cells, and my research revealed the genes were not controlling the behavior of the cell. The environment was controlling the behavior of the cell. But at this time, all of the scientists around me were genes, and I'm the only one that's looking at a different answer. So most of my colleagues just said, oh, your work is interesting, but it's not very important. But I kept studying the cells. The cells were my guru. They were my teacher. I observed and watched the cells. And when I started to understand how can an environment change genetics, all of a sudden I realized that the information from the environment was being controlled by the cell membrane, the skin. And that information then went into the nucleus and controlled the genes. So I started to look at the nature of the cell membrane. And I saw the mechanism of what are called receptors. Like in our membrane, our skin, we have receptors, eyes, ears, nose, taste, and how we see the environment, and that information controls our biology. In the tissue culture, I saw the same thing. The environment was coming in through receptors, and then the membrane would tell the genes what to do. Well, I was so excited by this, and I remember typing on the computer my insights and talking to the computer about, oh, this is how life is controlled. And then I realized as I was typing on the computer, what happens is no two people are the same. And I say, how do I say that biologically? How can I say no two people are the same? The answer is simple. You cannot take your cells and your organ and put it into another person's body, because the immune system says self. And if you put somebody else's cells in your body, the immune system says not self. And the immune system will eliminate it. So I said, wow, no two people are the same. Where's the difference? And then I realized on the surface of our cells, there are special receptors, antennas. And no two people have the same set of antennas. I say, yeah, but what are the receptors reading? I say, they're reading environmental signal. I said, then no two people are reading the exact same environmental signal.
The only advantage that I've ever had as a person, I've never been the most talented, never been the biggest, the fastest, the strongest, even though I was a four-sport athlete my whole life, you know, at the top of every sport that I've ever played, I was never the most talented. I was never the fastest guy, never the strongest guy. I've always been a small guy my whole life. You know, I was that guy who would show up and they knew that I was the guy that played football. They knew behind the jersey I was probably number 3 and number 29 in college, but when I would show up on the scene, I would always get the reaction, this is the guy, because I was small. I didn't even look the part. But the only thing I've always had, my only advantage was I wasn't afraid of hard work. But most importantly, I knew what I represented. And so by knowing what I represented, my commitment, my dedication, and my perfection to my craft and what I represented, it was always on another level. And so now when guys did 10 sprints, I did 30 because I knew I was working for something greater than myself, and what I represented was always greater than myself. And for example, 2 weeks ago, I was with a kid downtown Atlanta. So it was this 15-year-old kid. He had been acting up in school, giving his mom problems. He hadn't seen his father since he was born, basically. And I take him downtown Atlanta, and I take him right under a bridge. And so now you got Turner Field, you got where the Falcons play, where the Hawks play, You got the world of Coca-Cola, you got a jail, you got these successful companies, you got people going to work, got the briefcases, doing their thing, you got life happen. And then you got under a bridge, you got a gentleman, a grown man, sound asleep, cardboard box, sleep, as if a person would be in a bed, sleep. And I looked at the kid and I said, do you think he planned to be there? I said, do you think when he got of age at a certain point in his life, do you think he said, man, one day I'll probably be sleeping under a bridge on a cardboard box? The kid said, no. I said, what do you think happened? The kid said, I don't know. What do you think happened, eh? I said, I think life happened. He said, what do you mean life? I said, I think at a certain point in his life, he was excited, he was jacked, he enjoyed something. He was a part of something special, something had a legacy attached to it, whether it was his family, whether it was a dream, a goal, an aspiration. I think at a certain point, every day he got up, something he represented, he got excited about it, he was driven, he was committed, he was dedicated about it, he was stoked about it, he was jacked about it. But I think at a certain point, life made him forget what he represented. And life stole his joy, his peace, his happiness. Life zipped him of that drive. Life took that dedication, that commitment, so much so to the guy that was once driven, to the guy that was once happy and excited about what he was a part of and what he represented and the legacy that was attached to it. That same guy ended up sleeping under a bridge. The only advantage I've ever had, everything I encountered and everything I ever hit in my life, I understood what I represented, and life will never take that away from me. There was times when I went to practice, I hadn't even eaten, and guys would be out there complaining, and the only thing I was working on was my work ethic and my drive and my dream and my goal to get to where I was trying to get to. And I knew if I would have stopped in that moment, I would never get to where I was trying to get to. I would really miss meals. And I'm working toward this dream and this goal, and I finally get to the point. I can smell it, I can taste it, I can see it, and I'm a part of something, right? And we go and we work every single day. We show up 5 o'clock in the morning. We're working towards something. We got an element of collective character. We got an element of responsibility, accountability. We got an element, man, when I tell you I got your back, I got your back. When I tell you I care about you, I care about you. When I tell you I love you, I love you. I was a part of something. And I get to the point to where I'm a projected first-round draft pick, and I go out and I make a tackle, and this is the thing that people don't even know. People know my life changed behind the game of football, but people don't understand the play and how it happened. People don't know that wasn't even my guy. But as I'm running and checking my guy, I see my teammate getting beat. My guy who I told in the tunnel, hey man, if you get beat, I got your back. And I said, man, I gotta go, I gotta have his back. And I go up and I roll up and I go to hit this guy to end the game. This tackle probably would have ended the game if I'd have hit him and caught him. I hit him, and as soon as I hit him, it seemed as if every breath in my body left. I lost control of my body. Never happened to me before. And I'm not just bringing it in one aspect of life. I'm bringing it in every single aspect of life. I'm not gonna be one of these people in the world that's a public success, but they're a private failure. Meaning they give everything they got to one aspect of life, but the other areas, they lack off. No, I'm gonna give every single thing I got to every aspect of my life because I represent something. When people see me, they think something. Whether that's character, never giving up, never surrender. And the thing that we can never do is forget what we represent, because that's how guys end up under a bridge on a cardboard box.
I'm a very lucky person. In the past 18 years, in my apartment, I talk to 18 young people like me that we want to build up a company using internet to help doing business easier, to using internet to support every small business, support every young people, every woman, that if they have a dream, if they have some ideas, we will enable them to make their dream true and sell their products all over the world. That was year 1999 in my apartment. Well, very few people believe that, but we made it happen in only 18 years. I'm a very, very lucky person. And people say, have you ever learned business before? Have you done business before? Have you learned like MBAs? No, I have never learned any knowledge about how to do business. I never got even one day of training of computer. I still even to today, I don't know how computer works. A lot of people challenge me, how can you run such a big e-commerce company without knowing anything about the knowledge, without anything about the financing and marketing? And I say, this is because I know people. I know what people want. I know what people don't want. And this is where I learned that. I learned my experience of working with people when I was a student in the university. I was not a good student. That's why I really don't like a lot of good students. I'm always like among the 10 or 15, never got the number 1, number 2 in my class from primary school to university. I failed 3 times for the universities, and finally I got into the university. And I was the believer. And I believe e-commerce, I believe the internet, even the internet bubble bursted. Many of my colleagues at that time said they're talking about we should raise more money, change our internet business into real business. And they considered I was the crazy guy. And 15 years later, I am the only one came back. Because we believe it. We believe internet. We believe entrepreneurship. We believe the future. I would love to discuss something about the failures, mistakes we made. The thing I feel most thankful is all the mistakes, all the refuse that I got. Because without that, there would never be Alibaba. In the past 18 years, every day we make mistakes. Every day we were rejected. I think being rejected, being refused by people, that is very natural. Why people should help you? You have to prove yourself, then people would help you. Alibaba was not made today. Alibaba was made 18 years ago in my apartment. The believing that using internet empower others, using internet to help young people, small business, and women will have bright future. So it's been 18 years hard working we came here. Today, there are a lot of books about us. I don't read these books because I think these books are not about us. People love to see successful stories, but most of the success stories, they succeed because of the mistakes. I encouraging all the young people, entrepreneurs, to learn from the mistakes. Do not study successful stories. Successful stories in the Harvard Business School, normally, there are a lot of things behind you don't know. But if you learn from the mistakes, if you learn, especially the failure case studies, it's going to help you. What I want to say is not about you. You learn from mistakes does not mean you will avoid mistakes. You will learn the attitude towards these mistakes and never give up, fighting again. Of course, it's very painful when you're rejected, when you're refused. I went all around looking for money. Nobody give us the money. I all go around looking for partnerships. Nobody believe small business and e-commerce in China will work. So stay foolish to your dream and continue to fight. So this is what we did. As an entrepreneur, we never complain. When people complain, the opportunity comes. So if you can solve the complaints, that is your opportunity.
I was looking at life and going, what do I want my life to be about? And I saw successful people who were depressed, I saw rich people who were sad, and I saw famous people who in the end had to find a new way of getting happy. And just this week as we're talking, we saw what happened to Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain, and rest in peace to both of them, and blessings and our best wishes and prayers for both of them, and the millions of other people in the world that we don't know about, and the people that we don't talk about and we don't see because they're not famous and well known. At 18, I was awakened to the belief and understanding that if I did not focus on my consciousness, there was no such thing as happiness and meaning. If I didn't go inward, there was no chance of longevity in any form, because I saw all of this around me. So what I saw in the monks that was different is that they almost had tapped in to the way of the universe. And I'll explain what I mean by that. What I mean is that if you observe the universe carefully, every element in the universe is constantly serving, constantly. The water provides us with energy. The trees provide us with nutrition. The oxygen is just fueling our bodies, and it's taking nothing from us. You look at the tree, when you take shade of a tree, the tree doesn't say that will be $2. And now we're bottling up air and selling it, right? There's oxygen bars. But the point being that there is every element. The sun is giving light and it is growing our plants and vegetables. The rain is growing our plants and vegetables. Every element in the universe is serving. And what I learned as a monk, and you speak about this, and we just experienced it so deeply when we were there, is the only way to be aligned with the universe is to serve. Because then you're acting in alignment. Because the universe is serving. So when you're serving, you are now in the universe. You're now with the universe. The universe is your ally. Whereas as long as you're trying to serve yourself and be greedy, you're now working against the universe. So when people talk about the universe has your back, or you should work with the universe or be aligned with the universe, that's what it means. Universe isn't about, oh, universe, I want a big car, give it to me. That's not being aligned with the universe. Being aligned with the universe is choosing service as your focus. Awakening signifies that we're asleep. When you say we have to become woke or awaken, or any of these words that we're using now, rising above, it all means that we're asleep. So even though we think we're awake, we're saying we're consciously asleep. And therefore the earth, people around us, conscious creators, everyone you've mentioned, are simply all trying to wake each other up. And we all know that when you don't wake up in the morning, the alarm just has to get louder and louder and louder. And if the alarm doesn't get louder and louder and louder and louder, we don't wake up. And so if you see the earth in a state of emergency, if you see the environment in a state of emergency, if you're looking at the world in a state of emergency, it's because the alarm is just getting louder and louder and louder and trying to say, wake up, like wake up, you know? And so for me, that's the process that we all need to go through. Just as it's tough to wake up in the morning after you've been out to a party, you've had too much to drink, you've done something that you weren't proud of, or you've wasted your time, just as it's hard to wake up every morning when you've done that the night before, it's hard to wake up consciously when that's all you've done for lifetimes, like when that's all you've done for your whole life. That's how hard it is. And I think that's why we struggle. So one of the things about gratitude is that studies show that when you're in gratitude, when you're feeling gratitude, you can't be in another state. So you can't be angry or sad or disappointed when you're being grateful. So grateful for me is like a seed. And when you're grateful, you plant this seed in your life, which is going to grow a beautiful tree and shade and fruits. And it helps you avoid what I call weeds in our life. So when we're planting sadness or disappointment or anger, these are like weeds in our life. So every day I'm trying to plant seeds of gratitude. And I recommend doing it the first thing you do in the morning, but even more importantly, the last thing you do before you go to bed. Because when you do it before you go to bed, you wake up with gratitude in the morning. So it programs your mind to be grateful the next day.
As a leader, you have to be balanced, right? You have to be balanced. So let's just take humility and ego, because we're looking for people that are humble. But at the same time, you can have someone that's so humble that they lack confidence. That's bad. On the other side of that spectrum, you can have someone that's so confident that they're overconfident, their ego's big, and they don't listen to anyone else. Where do you want to be? You want to be balanced, somewhere in the middle. I talked about the fact that you need to be articulate as a leader. That's great. Can you be a leader that talks so much that people stop listening to you? The other end of the spectrum is you are a leader that doesn't say enough, and now the team doesn't know what direction they're supposed to be going in. So where do you want to be? You want to be somewhere in the middle. You want to be balanced. You're not going to make any excuses. You're not going to blame anyone else. You're going to take ownership of whatever happens. And when something goes wrong, instead of pointing fingers and blaming someone else, you're going to take ownership of that problem. You're going to take ownership of figuring out what the solution to that problem is, and you're going to take ownership of implementing that solution. So that is the number one thing that I'm looking for a leader to do, is to take ownership of the problems. And again, we call that extreme ownership.
Make your luck. You got to make your luck. And if you make it, if you keep putting forth the maximal effort, that luck's going to come. You're going to make your luck happen. We lie to ourselves. We don't tell ourselves the way things really are. And when we do that, then we can't fix our problems. If we can't fix our problems, we're not going to improve. So we have to be truthful to ourselves. I have to be truthful to myself. You have to be truthful to yourself. You have to stop rationalizing, stop making excuses, stop telling yourself little watered down assessments of where you're really at. Tell yourself the truth so that you can get where you want to go. You can be who you want to be. You can be who you should be. Who you should be when you do what you know you should do, when you pay attention to the little things, when you implement discipline, true and unflinching and unmitigated discipline in your life, when you stop trying to find a sweatless solution, when you look for weaknesses to work on, when you allow no easy excuses. And all that starts when you stop lying to yourself. When you stop lying to yourself, that's when you can become who you know you should be. When you tell yourself the truth about where you are, so you can make sure you are in the right place. And if you're not in the right place, then you can get yourself on the path to get there. The path of discipline, the path of hard work, and the path of truth.
Those days when I'm tired or worn out or just basically sick of the grind, what do I do on those days? I go anyways. I get it done, even if I'm just going through the motions. I go through the motions. I don't really want to work out. I work out. I really don't want to hammer on a project. I hammer on the project. Don't really want to get up and get out of bed. Yeah, I get up and get out of bed. Now, these could be signals that you need some time off. And those signals might be right. They could be correct. But don't take today off. Not today. Wait until tomorrow. Don't give in to the immediate gratification that is whispering in your ear. Shut that down. Do not listen to that little voice. Instead, go through the motions. Lift the weights. Sprint the hill. Work on the project. Get out of bed. As an overall rule, I do not like procrastination. You need to get things done. But if you are going to rest, that is one thing that you should procrastinate on. That's the one thing I want you to put off until tomorrow. And if, when tomorrow comes, you still feel like you need to rest or you need to take a break, then okay, take it. But the chances are you won't. You won't need that rest. Chances are you will realize that the desire to rest was just weakness. It was just the desire to take the path of least resistance, the downhill path, the easy path. And by simply going through the motions, you overcame that path. And you stayed on the righteous path, the disciplined path. You stayed on the war path, which is right where you know that you belong.
I believe in human possibility, human potential, and I think that one of our biggest limiting beliefs is the belief of how limited we really are. And so my interest is to give people the science to begin to understand how powerful they really are. And I think that science really is the language that does that really well. And the new sciences like quantum physics and neuroplasticity, neuroscience, neuroendocrinology, psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection, epigenetics, all of those sciences point the finger at possibilities. So I want to create a language for people from a philosophical or theoretical standpoint for them to begin to understand what's possible. But then I want to be able to have those people begin to wire that information in their brain completely, because learning is making new connections, right, in the brain. But remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections, and it's so much easier to lose our vision than to remember it, right? So then we have to begin to hardwire the brain or install the neurological hardware in preparation for an experience. So the more people understand what they're doing and why, then the how gets easier. So I want to then set up the conditions in an environment, in a workshop where people can begin to apply or personalize what they learn so that they can have an experience. An experience then further enriches the brain. But the prize of an experience is an emotion. And once you start feeling unlimited, once you start feeling abundant, once you start feeling worthy, now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. So knowledge is for the mind and experiences for the body, and people begin to embody the truth of that philosophy. Now, if they can repeat it over and over again, it'll become innate in them. It'll become natural, second nature, it'll become easy. They'll begin to master that philosophy. So I want people to begin to understand that thoughts are very powerful. Feelings drive our thoughts, and that they can begin to create a better life for themselves once they understand some of these principles.
Hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you decide to no longer think the same way, make the same choice, act the same way, create the same experience, or live by the same emotion, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There is going to be a certain amount of uncertainty and unpredictability. And the moment you feel uncomfortable, you just stepped into the river of change. Now, most people, the moment they feel uncomfortable, they return back to the familiar state of the mind and body. They start thinking the same way, acting the same way, feeling the same way, and they say, this feels right. No, in fact, that feels familiar. Now, going from the old self to the new self is the neurological, is the chemical, is the biological, is the hormonal, and even genetic death of the old self. That void, that place of uncertainty, that unknown, is the perfect place to create it. And if you and I can become comfortable in that unknown and begin to decide who we do want to be. In other words, many people say when they're in that unknown, I can't predict my future. This doesn't feel right. Well, the best way to predict your future is to create it, not in the known, but in the unknown. So what if you said now, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? What behaviors do I want to demonstrate? And if you were to close your eyes and begin to think about how you are going to act, the mere act of mentally rehearsing who you're going to be begins to install the neurological circuits in your brain to look like the experience has already occurred. Now what that means is that the brain is primed in its circuitry to no longer be living in the past, but now living in the future.
If you're not being defined by a vision of the future, then you're left with the old memories of the past and you will be predictable in your life. And if you wake up in the morning and you're not being defined by a vision of the future, as you see the same people and you go to the same places and you do the exact same thing at the exact same time, it's no longer that your personality is creating your personal reality. Now your personal reality is affecting or creating your personality. Your environment is really controlling how you think and feel unconsciously, because every person, everything, every place, every experience has a neurological network in your brain. Every experience that you have with every person produces an emotion. So some people will use their boss to reaffirm their addiction to judgment. They'll use their enemy to reaffirm their addiction to hatred. They'll use their friends to reaffirm their addiction to suffering. So now they need the outer world to feel something. So to change then is to be greater than your environment, to be greater than the conditions in your world, and the environment is that seductive. So then why is meditation the tool? Well, let's sit down, let's close our eyes, let's disconnect from your outer environment. So if you're seeing less things, there's less stimulation going to your brain. If you're playing soft music or you have earplugs in, less sensory information coming to your brain, so you're disconnecting from your environment. If you can sit your body down and tell it to stay like an animal, stay right here. I'm gonna feed you when we're done. You can get up and check your emails, you can do all your texts, but right now, you're gonna sit there and obey me. So then, when you do that properly, and you're not eating anything, or smelling anything, or tasting anything, you're not up experiencing and feeling anything, you would have to agree with me that you're being defined by a thought. So when the body wants to go back to its emotional past, you become aware that your attention is on that emotion, and where you place your attention is where you place your energy. You're siphoning your energy out of the present moment into the past, and you become aware of that, and you settle your body back down in the present moment, because it's saying, well, it's 8 o'clock, you normally get upset because you're in traffic around this time, and here you are sitting, and we're used to feeling anger, and you're off schedule. Oh, it's 11 o'clock, and you usually check your emails and judge everybody. Well, your body's looking for that predictable chemical state. Every time you become aware that you're doing that, and your body is craving those emotions, and you settle it back down into the present moment, you're telling the body it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind, and now your will is getting greater than the program. And if you keep doing this over and over again, over and over again, over and over again, just like training a stallion or a dog, it's just gonna say, I'm gonna sit. And the moment that happens, and the body's no longer the mind, when it finally surrenders, there's a liberation of energy. We go from particle to wave, from matter to energy, and we free ourselves from the chains of those emotions that keep us in the familiar past. And we've seen this thousands of times. In fact, we can actually predict it now on a brain scan. The hardest part is to teach our body emotionally what the future will feel like ahead of the actual experience. So what does that mean? You can't wait for your success to feel empowered. You can't wait for your wealth to feel abundant. You can't wait for your new relationship to feel love, or your healing to feel whole. I mean, that's the old model of reality, of cause and effect, waiting for something outside of us to change how we feel inside of us. And when we feel better inside of us, we pay attention to whoever or whatever caused it. What that means then is that from the Newtonian world, is that most people spend their whole life living in lack, waiting for something to change out there. The Newtonian world is all about the predictable. It's all about predicting the future. But the quantum model of reality is about causing an effect. The moment you start feeling abundant and worthy, you are generating wealth. The moment you're empowered and feel it, you're beginning to step towards your success. The moment you start feeling whole, your healing begins. And when you love yourself and you love all of life, you'll create an equal. And now you're causing an effect. And I think that's the difference between living as a victim in your world, saying, I am this way because of this person or that thing or this experience. They made me think and feel this way. When you switch that around, you become a creator of your world, and you start saying, my thinking and my feeling is changing an outcome in my life. And now that's a whole different game, and we start believing more that we're creators of reality.
The one thing that discipline definitely does help you with is it helps you get things done. And when you get things done, when you actually do things, you have more success. If you have more success, and sometimes a big part of success is just not being lazy and just doing it. That's like 90% of it is just showing up. Get there and start working. Like, you're not gonna feel perfect every day. If I only worked out when I felt good, I'd be a pfeff. Because there's a lot of days I don't want to do it. It's pretty much the same with everybody that actually gets good at something. There's got to be those days you push through, and they're probably going to be more numerous than the days you don't. And so the benefit of discipline, in my eyes, has always been that through discipline I get things done. I always say that I'm like the most lazy, disciplined person I know, because I don't want to do it, but I always do. If I look back on anything I've ever done, mistakes I've ever made, paths that something that I put out that I didn't quite think, man, maybe I just waited 3 months before I released that, or maybe I should have, re-edited that blog post a couple more times before I put it online, or those things drive me crazy. The things that I've done have driven me crazy, but yelling at someone I didn't have to yell at them for, whatever. But the most important thing is always for all people to recognize that you're not who you were a year ago. You're not who you were 5 years ago. You're not who you were last week. You're who you are now, and this is the only you have control over. So you gotta regulate how much you dwell on regrets of the past. You really gotta be careful, because it's good to have a little. Because my regrets, whether it's things of professional nature or the very few regrets friendship-wise, which is one thing that makes me very happy. But there's life is strange. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of factors happening in life. But for sure, who I am now wouldn't have ever happened if I didn't f up. If I didn't make those mistakes, I wouldn't have understand the importance of friendship and kindness. And if I hadn't been cruel at some point in my life, or someone hadn't been cruel to me, I wouldn't understand the beauty of love. I wouldn't understand the full range of it, because I hadn't felt the sting. If nobody ever punches you in the face, you don't really appreciate safety. Because a lot of people don't even understand what safety is. You could say, oh, we're safe, but you are so not safe at any moment, And when someone's punched you in the face a bunch of times, and you've been in a street fight with some guy you barely knew, you got in an argument with him, there's something about regular safety that's sweeter. It's more delicious. It's way better to drive your car straight after you almost lost control on a turn. I'm not saying that you should go sideways around corners, but what I am saying is that there's a yin and a yang to this world, man. And you gotta fuel yourself with the f-ups. And most people get stuck in these patterns because they define themselves as a f-up, or they define themselves as a person who doesn't follow through on their ideas, or a person who doesn't pursue their real interests and loves. You define yourself by that. Well, I guess, no, you don't. No, you have started things and you quit, and it gives you a horrible sense of regret that's made you define yourself by that. You don't have to do that. And everybody's different. Everybody's similar, but everybody's different. And your attitude has a giant effect, not just on your life, but on other people's lives around you. That's the other thing about it. Those I can't catch a break guys, get them the f away from me. I can't be around those guys. I don't want to hear that shit. I don't want to hear that shit. I don't buy it. Because everybody has bad breaks. I've had a shit ton of bad breaks. But you know what I did? I stayed up. And I thought through it, and I figured out what the f I did wrong, and then I went back. It's like, I fucked up everything I've ever done 100 times. And there's no other way to do it. And I've had a bunch of shitty breaks. Everybody has. But you gotta realize when you have those shitty breaks what that is. It's an opportunity for you to reassess, reboot, get better, figure out another way, find another way through. This is just little challenges. And the people that look at those challenges and go, why do I always have these challenges? They're cancer. Those people are dangerous to be around. They will rob you of your enthusiasm. They don't give you any fuel. They're the opposite of fuel.
Men use the image of female perfection to motivate themselves. And that's exactly right. That's precisely what they do. You see that in the Tom Sawyer story. So Tom Sawyer is about 12 years old, and he's still hanging around with his friends like Huck Finn. And this girl moves across the street, Becky, and she comes out, and he's struck by her for the first time in his life. Something's changed. And the first thing he does is hop up on a picket fence and show off and balance in front of her. And he's saying, well, look at me, look at me. He's like the male bowerbird building something beautiful so the female will approve of it. And it's motivation, and that's something that I think modern women don't really understand about men. They don't understand that at least to the degree that males are uncorrupted and not bitter because of being rejected. They're doing everything they can to kneel before the eternal image of the feminine and try to make themselves worthy. I don't understand the situation with women as well as I understand the situation with men, obviously, being a man. I don't know if women have any idea how paralyzing they are to, especially young men. A very large number of my clinical clients, but also young men I've talked to in general, are absolutely terrified of women because they're terrified of being rejected. And the terror exists in precise proportion to the attraction to the woman. Men make such fools of themselves in front of women that they're attracted to. It's because, first of all, they don't see the woman that they're attracted to. Because what the hell do they know about her? They don't see her as an individual. They see her as the manifestation of a judgmental ideal. And then it's only in establishing the relationship with the actual woman that they can start differentiating between the judgmental ideal and the actual individual woman. And that also requires a sacrifice. And the sacrifice is, you never can have an ideal woman. So to have a relationship with any woman, you have to sacrifice the relationship with the ideal woman, and you have to see the individual woman and separate her from the ideal. And that's exactly the case. I had one of my clients who ran this men's group, which was quite interesting. One of the things they had the initiates do, which was very intelligent, was to go out and ask 50 women in one day for their phone numbers. Why? Politely, properly, you know. It was a game, but it wasn't a stupid game. And the idea was, get over your fear of rejection. And how do you do that? By encountering it continually and continually and continually, so that you're no longer paralyzed by this. The person that you can completely map and who only does positive things for you, it's like, A, you don't know that person. B, they're not communicating with you, nor you with them. Maybe they're just subordinating themselves to you or you to them. And you're not growing. You want someone who can. A real relationship is a wrestling match. It's a grappling phenomena that you both emerge transformed from. And that's what people want. They don't want to push over. Not unless there's something wrong with them. You know, a narcissistic person who never wants to be challenged will want a partner who does nothing but deliver exactly what they're told to deliver, but they will mistreat them beyond belief. What does the optimal relationship look like in terms of positive and negative emotion? You might say, well, utopia. Nothing but positive interactions. It's like, no. Imagine you get people to code the interactions they have with their partner during the day. You know, you sample it. You say, was that interaction positive or negative? And then what you're trying to do is predict the longevity of the relationship. Okay, so here's the data. If it falls under 5 positive interactions to 1 negative interaction, the relationship doesn't continue. Fair enough, too much negative. That's easy to understand. If it exceeds 11 positive to 1 negative, the relationship doesn't last. Why? No challenge, right? What do you want from your partner? Bliss? No, you don't. It's with our fantasy that we first meet the unknown, right? Well, look, say you're going out with a new person. It's like, what do? You project a fantasy on them, and then you fall in love with the fantasy, and aren't you stupid? Because you're going to find out that the match between your damn fantasy and the actual person is tenuous at best. When you project the ideal and fall in love with it, you see what could be. It could be that, but it's going to take you a hell of a lot of work, because like, you got no shortage of flaws, and the other person has no shortage of flaws, and so you're bringing your flaws together, and that's going to produce a lot of friction, and you're going to have to engage in a lot of dialogue before you approach that level of perfection again, but maybe you can do it. And then you get to live happily ever after. Well, wouldn't that be nice?
You got to work your butt off. If you think that you're going to go and accomplish something really special and be the best in anything in the world, and you think you can do it without working, you make a big mistake. Because no matter what I did, if it was in bodybuilding or in acting or if it is in the political arena, it always took a lot of work. And you got to put out, and you got to, sometimes make a lot of sacrifices. Notice, if you're not willing to work hard, forget about it.
Everyone has a problem with time, but the day has 24 hours, and we sleep 6. Now, I know there's some out there that say, whoa, I need 8. Well, I say just sleep a little faster, because the bottom line is we have 6 hours of sleep, 24 hours are available, so you have 18 hours now available to your work, your family, your hobbies, and also to learn something new or to do something new, which could easily be that you want to learn a new language, or that you want to read as a New Year's resolution, I have to read a book every week, or you say, I'm going to go and reshape my body. So you're going to go and take this hour out of your schedule and say, I'm going to train an hour every day. So this is for most people a huge challenge, but it is totally doable, I can tell them, because the kind of things that I did when I came to this country, I mean, I went to school, I was working on construction, I was working out my 5 hours a day, I was taking acting classes from 8 o'clock at night to 12 midnight. I was doing all of those things. I wanted to make sure that out of the 24 hours of the day, that I don't waste one single hour. Those hours were too precious. And so there I just want to tell people, don't give me this thing, I have a difficult time with the time and I don't have time for this and I don't have that. You have time, you make the time. The most important thing is that you have a vision, that you have a goal. Because without that vision and without that goal, again, you're drifting around and you're never going to end up anywhere. People don't become successful just by accident. You know, I mean, maybe the guy that found gold in California and started the gold rush, but don't count on that. That's the one in a lifetime kind of a situation. So you got to really have a specific goal. And to me, to have that vision that I want to be Mr. Universe, that I want to be the greatest bodybuilder of all time, that was a great vision, and that specifically to look like Reg Park and to be up there on that stage and to lift the trophy overhead and to win the championship over and over and over again. So that was a great goal. You have to have a goal. Now, it doesn't have to be that specific goal, but it has to have some goal. This is why I always recommend to people, sit down, take your time, and start thinking about, why do you want to work out? What is your goal? And that can be as crazy as it is. It could be, I want to impress girls. If that's your goal, so be it, but it motivates you. It could be that you're emulating a certain, bodybuilder or a certain football player, a certain boxer, whatever it is. Have those pictures put all over the wall like I did when I was a kid. I put pictures of Reg Park and of Sonny Liston, of boxers and of Ali and of powerlifters and weightlifters all over my bedroom, wall, so that every day when I go to sleep, every day when I wake up, I look at those pictures and they motivate me. You need that motivation, and then therefore you have this kind of imprint in front of you all the time, and you know exactly what you're chasing. This is why I always smiled when I was in the gym. People always came up to me and says, why are you smiling? You're working out 5 hours a day. You're doing the same as the other guys, but the other guys have a sour face. They're pissed off that they have to do another rep or another set or something. I looked forward to another 1,000 reps of sit-ups. I looked forward to another 500 pounds of leg press or squat. I looked forward to doing more and more curls. Why? Because I knew that every rep that I did and every set that I did and more weights that I lifted, I get one step closer to turning that vision into reality. So I was turned on by that. I was excited. I couldn't wait to get to the gym.
I don't know if people appreciate what things produce. And my whole life